wife was a homeschooler at the time, and she was a school teacher before we had kids. Then she homeschooled them for 20 years, and then she went back to teaching school. Now, what's interesting is I would put them to bed. They had chosen, we had two bedrooms. One of them they turned into a school. The other one, they wanted to sleep together so they could talk. You know how that goes. Not only women talk, but boys talk too. And so here they would talk. We would hear them mumbling and talking before they'd go to sleep. And we were good with that because communication is a good thing. Well, I would put them to bed every night, and I would lay on a pillow, and I would look at them, and we would talk for a half an hour every single night until I sent them to college. I mean, that's the way it was. It was a ritual in our home. And it was a bonding experience for me. I needed that as a father. They needed that as sons of a father. And so one night, Joseph was 5 years old. He said to me, "Dad, can I ask you a question?" Now, they could ask me any question. I always said, you can ask me anything you want. I will never lie to you. My parents lied to me. I will never lie to you. But he said something interesting that night. He said, "Dad, I want to ask you a question. I know where babies grow, and I know where they come out. How do they get in there in the first place?" I said, "Well, let me tell you something." And I told him everything. I mean, the whole shebang. And he goes, "Wow, Dad." And Michael says, "Wow, Dad." And I go in the bedroom, and Nan says, "Wow, Dad." And then she says, "Now, I'm not too worried about Michael saying anything in public because he was real shy. But Joseph, he might say something in public that'll embarrass me." I said, "I'll take care of that." So I go in the bedroom, and I said, Mom's not worried about Michael saying anything in public, but she's worried that you might say something in public to embarrass her. He says, "Don't worry about that, Dad. I won't say anything in Publix, but I might in Walmart." So it made you, so he had the question, what were they doing in there in the first place? How did they get in there? Well, how did Israel get in Egypt in the first place? So basically, we know the story, don't we? Most of us here do know the story that Joseph and the coat of many colors and the 12 brothers of Jacob, and who was Jacob's favorite son? Joseph. He gave him a special coat that only kings wore. And the brothers, the 10 brothers, not Joseph's youngest brother, but the 10 brothers decided to sell him into slavery, and he went to Egypt. But eventually, he became the prime minister of Egypt through a series of miracles, right? All right. As a kid, that story of the Bible was my favorite story of the Bible. It's just one of those things. My mom, when I was young, bought a set of Bible story books. We did not become Adventists. She also bought bedtime story books, and she bought Your Story Hour records. And we used to play them all the time. We didn't go to church, and we didn't do anything. But let me tell you, those Bible stories, we would turn them on as kids and listen to them all the time. And it was a wonderful way to learn about all the Bible characters in the Bible. So when we started having kids, we bought the whole set, and it was cassettes in those days. Now they even went to CDs, and now they're online, and we've got them all. So we still have them all. I'm a lover of stories. So Joseph went there, and he became the prime minister, and there was a famine in the land that was supposed to last how many years? 7 years. And so the brothers ran out of food, and the father, Jacob, said, "You need to go and get some food from Egypt." I don't know how they know it, but they've got food. And so they go there, and guess who's on the throne? Joseph. But they don't recognize him now because they sold him when he was how old? 17. That's exactly right. So he looks like a different person. He's in his 30s now, and he's on the throne, and he has the Egyptian haircut and all of that stuff. And so they didn't know who he was, and he spoke a foreign language, but he could hear and understand what they were saying. And so he eventually told the king, and the king, through a long series of events that were wonderful, said, "Why don't you bring your whole family, and I'll give you the land of Goshen, and you can raise your children there, and we'll feed you there for these 7 years." And so that's what they did. That's how they got into Egypt in the first place. So then Moses was raised up to bring them back out, right? Now here's a scripture in Exodus 1:7. "But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them." They had kept themselves a distinct race, Ellen White said, having nothing in common with the Egyptians in customs or religion. And that lasted for a while. But it all changed after that. Unfortunately, they started to assimilate the Egyptian customs and practices. In fact, they even bowed down and worshiped idols. Many of them did. Everything around the children of Israel was calculated to make them forget the living God. And isn't that what's going on in the world today? Everything is calculated for us to forget God, to not think about him. We stay so busy, we don't even have time to read the scriptures. We're so busy all the time, and then we want to, on our days off, we want to go to Epcot and all these other places and Disney World and have fun. Is that what you're here to do? No, I'm just kidding. And so, I'm just playing with you guys. So here we have all of these things, and it's a rah, 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 and it's all designed to keep you from thinking about who? God. That's exactly right. Now, the habits of some had become so much like the Egyptians that they preferred to dwell in Egypt. Now, is that what's happening to us as a people? I think so. Let me tell you why. We're collecting houses and lands. We're putting up 401ks. We're preparing for our retirement. We're doing all of the things. We might have our toys. I've got my own motorcycle, and I've done 3 cross-country trips across the United States. I have my toys. You have your toys. All of us have something that keeps us from the main purpose of life, and that is to win souls for the kingdom. Everything that we are, everything that we have, it should be moving us toward winning souls so that they will not be eventually lost. And that's our purpose. But Satan is trying to keep us busy. Did Israel know that their time was nearly over? Did they know that? They were there for 400 years. Did they know it? They did know it. Actually, Abraham had the prophecy, and all the elders knew the prophecy. Here's the prophecy. It's in Genesis 15. Now, when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them. And they will afflict them 400 years, and also the nation whom they served I will judge. Afterwards, they shall come out with great possessions. So they knew their time was up. 400 years had passed. They knew it was up. Now, do we know that Jesus is coming soon? Yeah. I wonder how many of us would admit that we're really comfortable here and we don't want to leave either. You know, because we know what we have to go through to get to the other side, don't we? Now, a lot of people say, a lot of my friends in the past have said, well, you know, that time of trouble such as never was that's going to go on in the world, I don't want to go through that. I hope the Lord just lets me go to retirement, go to sleep. I'll wake up on the other side of that, and I don't have to go through any of it. Well, I don't know that you're going to go to heaven after that with that kind of attitude, honestly, because God is going to try to wake you up just like he did the Israelites. The Israelites had become worldly. Now, each day and every year, all through their life, they were becoming more and more like the Egyptians. What did God do to wake them up? What did he do to change them? He brought trouble to them. Trouble. Just like our time of trouble. He brought trouble to them. Now, we have a young fellow in our church. He's 17 years old. And he is the most secular kid in our church. He grew up in our church, born in our church, raised in our church. They went away, did some missionary work for a while. This kid is so worldly that Nan and I felt there was no hope for this kid. All right? And he found out yesterday he has a brain tumor. Do you know what that did for him? Now he's talking about, Mama, I need to get baptized. Mama, I need to get right with Jesus. And that's what happened to Israel. Now they have a king that doesn't recognize Joseph. That hates them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. All right? He didn't know. what does that mean? Well, Ellen White says this. God was blessing them, gave them the best land in Egypt, blessed them, multiplied them, made their herds get bigger. They were getting wonderful results, but they were selfishly hoarding the truth and not telling others about it. And becoming more and more Egyptian in their thoughts and more Egyptian in their life. And so God raised up purposely a king to change them and to put a curse on them so that they would finally cry out to him and say, Lord, help us. Do you understand? And sometimes trouble comes upon us and there's a purpose to it. It's a discipline that God is trying to bring to us so that we will finally wake up out of this lethargy that we have found ourselves in and living like Egyptians. Each one of you have Egyptian traits that you have accumulated through the years. Now, you think about this. This church is a pretty conservative church, all right? But I have worshiped all over the world. And I can guarantee you, you Adventists don't look like Adventists from Washington State or California or Oregon. They don't look like Adventists. They don't even act like, they don't talk like Adventists. They even drink a little wine for the stomach's sake. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with this picture? Do you understand how worldliness has crept into the church? Now, most of you are like me. You have hidden your Egyptian traits in a girdle, and they're poking to get out. And you don't want anybody to see them, but they're just beating their way to get out. I can guarantee you, you each have an Egyptian trait that it's a darling sin of yours, okay? And nobody knows about it. My father-in-law, he was a funny guy. I loved this guy. One day he says, I was in Walmart, and he said, I saw this big fat lady wearing one of those really tight pants, you know, those kind that... And she was walking along Walmart, and I was walking behind her, and he said, it looked like there was a bunch of monkeys in a Kroger sack trying to bunch their way to get out. And he said, she should have never been wearing that. Well, I think that's our Egyptian traits. They're poking their way trying to get out because we've never put them to death. We're feeding those monkeys. We're feeding our Egyptian traits by what we watch and what we listen to and who we hang around with and what we do and all the things that constantly attract our attention away from God. And instead, we're feeding the wrong things. And we have Egyptian traits in our heart. That's what we have. Now, does God do the same thing to us that he did to Israel and punish us for having Egyptian traits? Yes, he does. Now, Nan and I recently. Now, we're getting down to the last minutes of our day of our life. Nan and I. There's only a few minutes left of us. You know, we're 70, she's 69, I'm 70 years old. We've been married a lot of years since college. We got married. And everything that we do now, we're looking at end-of-life experiences. Do you know? A lot of you guys understand this, okay? Now, we've always had a will, okay? When the boys were born, we had a will. And that will said, we want to give our sons to so-and-so in case anything happens to mommy and daddy, all right? And these were people we trusted. And I asked the conference guy, I said, what should I do with my money? He goes, well, if you trust your kids with these people, you should trust them with your money. It's going to be expensive to take care of your kids, so give them your money. And we did. Now we're going down through life, and our kids have graduated from college. We put them through college and paid for all of it. And all those expenses, we took care of all of those, and now the kids are grown up. They have their own lives, and they have their own children. They don't need our money. They don't need our possessions. And so we were saying, God, what do you want us to do with it? Now, when you look at the spirit of prophecy, and I don't know how much you guys read, but if you look at the spirit of prophecy, these are letters written to you and me. Personal letters. And anything you want to know, all you have to do is start studying what the spirit of prophecy said. These works were written for us in the very last days to prepare us for the second coming, right? A special people in the last days. All right, now, Nan and I had studied it out, what God wants to do for wills. And I said to Nan, you know what? Why don't we study for our family worship? We have family worship every night. I said, why don't we study all about wills and legacies? What are we supposed to do with this money when we're done? All right, we've got a nice farm up in North Florida, and we don't owe anybody any money. We've got a little bit of money in the bank, and so we just need to know, what do you want us to do, God? So we started studying, and we studied and studied and studied and studied together every single night. We read sections of the Spirit of Prophecy in the Bible, all about wills and legacies. And do you know what she says? You know what she says? When you're finished in this earth, it doesn't belong to your kids, it belongs to God. And you should put it back to God because you are his stewards, and there's only two exceptions and two exceptions only. One, if you have dependent children, and number two, if your child is more interested in giving to the cause than you are and will disperse those funds, then you can trust him or her to give them to God's cause. So that's the only two exceptions. And so we ran across a quote. And the quote, now here's the quote that's going to be next. Now, does God sometimes punish us if we don't do what he asks us to do when we're professing to be Christians? We're professing to be Seventh-day Adventists living in the last days, and if you don't do what God asks you to do, does he punish you? Now, punish you is a little different word, because what he's trying to do is wake you up. Do you understand? He's tried to say, hello, is anybody home? And we ignore him, right? Now, listen to this quote. There are many who urge that they cannot do more for God's cause than they now do, but they do not give according to their ability. The Lord sometimes opens the eyes blinded by selfishness by simply reducing their income to the amount they are willing to give. Wow. That's pretty heavy. And she goes on to say this. Horses are found dead in the field or stable. Houses or barns are destroyed by fire or crops fail. In many cases, God tests man with blessings, and if unfaithfulness is manifested in rendering to him tithes and offerings, his blessing is withdrawn. He which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly. Now, here's the principle. Now, there's a young lady in our church. Everything that could go wrong went wrong, and she is constantly in trouble. And I went up to Tara one day, and I said, Tara, let me ask you this. Are you returning your tithes and offerings faithfully? And she said, no, I was, but I'm not now. I was always so faithful with my tithes. When did your troubles start? And she thought about it. When I quit returning tithes. I said, do you know how to fix this problem? Yes, I will fix it. God does it to wake us up. He did it to Israel to wake them up. But here we are assimilating Egyptian traits. We're wearing jewelry, we're drinking wine, we're going to movies, we're going to places we shouldn't go. We're becoming Egyptians essentially. And God is going to wake you up and knock Egypt right out of you. That's what he's going to do. Now, I have an Egyptian trait. I like movies. Don't tell anybody. But I like movies, okay? And in the movies, they always say, you know, they get somebody and they got them strapped down. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. You remember that? All right. Well, God is saying the same thing to us. We can do this the easy way by you just saying, Lord, all that you have said we will do. Or we can do this the hard way and get a few lumps knocking Egypt right out of us. Do you understand? And that, what do you think the time of trouble is going to be doing for us? It's going to make us hate this old world. He wanted Egypt out of the Israelites, and he made it so they hated Egypt in the end, and because they were slaves in Egypt. They were treated bad in Egypt. Now I want to go. But before that, they were just as content to stay in Egypt as any place else. No, I don't want to move. But after all of that mess of going through years and years of slavery, and then seeing the 10 plagues going on to Egypt, they were then ready to go. Is God going to have to wake us up the same way? Is he? Unfortunately, yes. We're no different than the Israelites. But you can do it the easy way, or you can do it the hard way. We too are becoming more Egyptians in our thinking and a way of thought. Those who exalt their own ideas. Now listen to this. This is amazing. Now think about this. First of all, you say, I know what God says about eating flesh. I'm going to go ahead and eat it. Now, I'm sorry. I'm an Egyptian too, so I've got those Egyptian traits. But I'm just going to use this as an example, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm going to tell you this as an example. I know that we're told that there would be no safety in eating of any animal products before Jesus comes. Didn't she say that? Yes, she said that. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and eat it anyway. Now, what does that mean? All right? Listen to this quote. Those who exalt their own ideas above the plainly specified will of God are saying, as did Pharaoh, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? Woo! Did you just get stepped on? I did. And I'm not going to tell you my Egyptian traits in total, but I've got a bunch of them. All right, now, Ellen White says this, many Hebrews were content to remain in bondage rather than to go to a new country and meet the difficulties attending such a journey. And that's what we do when we say, I'd just rather be put in the grave and I'll wake up on the other side and I don't have to go through the time of trouble. If you have that attitude, you have an Egyptian trait. All right? Why did God allow Israel to go through so many trials? That they might be anxious to leave Egypt and choose the service of the true and merciful God. That's the purpose. And that's what the time of trouble is going to do for us. It's going to say for us, this is not my home. This farm is not my home. This Florida is not my home. Heaven is my home. Amen. And I'm ready to go. Amen. Now, will Christ return on this and find faith on the earth? That's what actually Jesus says. Will the Son of Man come? When the Son of Man cometh, will he find faith on the earth? And he's saying no. It's going to be really few and far between. We live in troublous times. Do you remember when COVID hit, how quickly everything locked up? Wasn't it crazy? It was a lunatic. You know, Ellen White says the last events will be rapid ones, right? Didn't she say that? The last events will be rapid ones. Remember when 9/11 hit, how everything was like, whoa, and then COVID hit, everything goes, whoa. Do you know how fast everything can button up? Are you ready? Are you ready? That's the point. Are you ready? You know, we need to ask ourselves, can I live in the sight of God righteous? Can I be righteous? You know, we need to be getting on our knees every single day of our lives. We should have faith even in the troubled times. Now, Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? We should never be found saying that at all. All that the Lord hath spoken, we will do, is what should be our motto. We should do it the easy way. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, brief story about Brian Robeson. This is my closing story. I love stories, boys and girls, and so I'm going to tell you this story. And there's a purpose to the story, all right? So just hang tight. Don't think I'm just wandering over there for nothing. And incidentally, I'm enjoying the music. And so Brian was 13 years old. He was 13 years old. He was riding his bicycle through near the mall in Hampton, New York, and he saw his mother get in a station wagon that wasn't theirs. And he and his friend, he stopped their bikes, and he looked, and his mother got in the car with a man he didn't know, and she kissed him. Oh, no. And the next week, she was calling his father, who was an engineer on oil platforms in Canada, and she says, I want a divorce. No, there's nobody in my life. I just want a divorce. I'm tired of our marriage. I'm not in love with you anymore, blah, blah, blah. And he's hearing this go on. So Brian is really, really mad at his mother. Brian is furious with his mother. So he is now getting out of school at the end of the school year, and he was supposed to go stay with his father in Canada. His mother knew he was mad with her about something. But she didn't know he knew, all right, the real truth. And so she bought him a brand new hatchet And she said, here's a hatchet. I thought you might could use it up in those Canadian woods, and put it on your belt. Put it on your belt. Let me see how it looks. And he did. And she goes, oh, you look like a little scout. I'm so proud of you. And he didn't even smile, He just put it on. And then he went to the plane. And the man says, get in the co-pilot seat. I'm going to teach you how to fly, young man. And he thought, wow, that'll be wonderful. So they took off, and they're flying. All right? So they're flying. You recognize the story? They're flying. So they're flying up north, and the old man teaches him. Now the old man's 40-something, so he's pretty old. And so he's flying his airplane, and it's not a pontoon plane, it's a regular plane, and he's flying them up to the oil fields in Canada. Now, the oil fields in Canada, where his father was, is in Newfoundland area. You know where that is? That's in the eastern part, okay, right off the coast, and that's where his father is. And he lived in a cabin near there. And so they were flying in that direction from Hampton, New York. Up they went, and the man taught him how to fly, how to go up, how to come down, how to use the rudders, and he says, they'll fly itself. Take your hands and feet off. It'll fly itself. As long as you keep going and don't slow down, it's just going to stay whatever angle you're on. So off they went, and they're going, and they're going, and they're going, and they're in Canada when the old man, he's going like this, oh no, and he has a heart attack, and he keels over, and when he does, he hits the controls, and the plane goes like this. Now, they're sitting at 10,000 feet, and the plane's going like this in that direction instead of that direction, you see? And off they're going, down, down, down. He's pushing the man back, and he knows the guy just died, and he didn't know what to do, and he pushes the man back, and he pulls the controls up to level himself, and he sees the altimeter at 7,000 feet. So he's straight and level, and he's going 7,000 feet. He gets on the radio, and he goes, hi, this is Brian. I'm a kid, and the pilot just died. What do I do? But he doesn't take his hand off of the button. And so everybody's trying to contact him, but he doesn't take his hand off the button. He doesn't know why anybody is not calling him. And then finally he gives up, and he throws the mic down. And then one guy comes back and says, I hear you, Brian. You need to constantly release after you talk the button. And so, but then it started scratching, and he lost the guy because he was going away from civilization. I don't know if you know much about Canada, but 90% of the people live right next to the border. They don't want the cold weather any more than you do, all right? And so they're living right next to the border, all right? And now he's going way up into the Northwest Territories, which is uninhabited. And he doesn't know what to do, and he can't talk to anybody. He said every 15 minutes he picks up the mic. He lets the thing fly himself. He doesn't touch anything. He says the guy said it'll fly itself, and I'll just let it fly itself until somebody comes back every 15 minutes. This is Brian Robertson. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? Nobody helps. Hours and hours go on. He is way up north in Canada. And then the engine shuts off. He looks for a lake. There's lakes all over that part of the world. He looks for a lake, and he goes down. And he says, if I could just get on that lake. There was a large L-shaped lake, and he lines it up. He hits the tops of trees. His right wing comes off. Then it goes into the water. He hits his head, and he almost gets knocked out, and it goes underwater, 20 feet deep in the water. He scrambles to get out, unbuckles himself, and he gets out, and he goes to the surface, and he swims to shore. It's quite a ways out in the middle of the lake. It's a big lake. He goes to the shore, he lays down on the shore, and he cries, and he throws up. What do I do now? And he thinks, oh, they have beacon locators in the plane. Not little ones. And this is a little one. And so he thinks, somebody's going to come and rescue me. They'll know where I am. But the guy filed a flight plan going this way, and now he's going hours this direction. You understand? And so nobody finds him. Only one plane flew over. He took his windbreaker, and he's running in the air. Please, somebody stop. The only plane he saw was that one plane. And the mosquitoes gathered around him when dusk hit. When dusk hit, I don't know if you know much about this part of the country, but Alaska is the same way. The mosquitoes are so bad at dawn and dusk, they will eat you alive. And so he put his windbreaker on, and he's crying. They're going in his ears, and he's screaming, please. And he's miserable. then it got cold, and they went away. So he slept on the beach that night. And he started, you see Canada? See? Now, he was supposed to be going right. Now, they went up to the Northwest Territories, which is really, really uninhabited. There's only a few Indians up there, okay, and some trappers and some people that go fishing every once in a while. Now, he lands on a lake, much like this one, and there's wood everywhere, but he doesn't know how to build a fire. He doesn't have matches or anything. But he remembered, if you rub sticks together, so he started rubbing sticks together to make a fire, and he couldn't. All he made was smoke. And he was so discouraged. He said, what do I do? What do I do? And he found this little cave out. It was a cutout in the side of this hill, and he slept in there. And one night, now he's not eating anything. 3 days go by, and one night, a animal came in, and he heard it, and it bumped up against him, and he kicked it, and it was a porcupine, and quills got stuck in his leg. And so this kid is going through it. He's getting civilization knocked out of him. You understand where I'm going with this story, boys and girls? Okay, so he's getting civilization knocked out of him, okay? So he throws his hatchet at the porcupine, and it lands against the wall with a spark. And then he said, there's flint on that wall. So the next morning he gets up, and he's hitting the wall, hits a spark. So he grabs this rock that's sitting up there. It's a flint rock, and he goes out, he gets a bird's nest, an old bird's nest, and he starts hitting this flint, and he got a fire going. Now he was a slave to this fire, because he had to constantly feed it, because he didn't want to go out. It took him 2 hours to get it started. So he's feeding it and feeding it and feeding it, and he's gathering wood, but he has something to do. But he's starving to death. He's 3 days out, but he found out if he built a fire, mosquitoes won't bother him. So at dawn and dusk, he's sitting by the fire. They're not going to bother him. So he sees these flocks of birds going over to these bushes. He goes over there, and there's chokecherries over there. So he starts eating chokecherries. They have pits in them. He just ate them. Just ate him and ate him. He was so hungry. He ate it. He had diarrhea all night long. And so he said, I got to find something better than this. I just got to find something better. So then he goes and he finds this bear. He's walking in the woods, and he says, that bear knows where food is. I'm going to follow that bear. And so he's following the bear, and this bear goes up to these raspberry bushes, and so he gets on the other side of the bushes, and the bear's going, yum, yum, and he's going, yum, yum, yum. They were so delicious. And he took his windbreaker off, and he filled him up with berries, and he put them in his little cave, all right? And when he put it in his cave, that night, a skunk comes in to eat it, and he shoos the skunk away, and it sprayed him. He thought, oh, man, what else is going to happen? And so he was just like stinking for days after that. He couldn't even stand himself. He said, oh, man, I'm glad I don't have a girlfriend out here. And so here he was in these woods getting civilization knocked right out of him. You understand? Because of all these little troubles, little by little, the edge of civilization was going away, and he was going to become the man that he was to become, which was a wilderness man. You understand what this wilderness experience did for him? For the rest of his life, he lived in the wilderness. He ate the wilderness. He loved the wilderness. Why? Because the civilization got knocked right out of him. And one day, you and I will experience the same thing, where Egypt is going to be knocked right out of us. We're going to go through so much trouble, such as never was, and we're not going to have a vestige of Egypt in us anymore. We're going to be yearning for the home in heaven. And that's the man he became. He was attacked by a moose and knocked down into the lake. He was attacked by a bear, thrown out of his lodge because he started learning how to live in the forest. He made a bow and arrow out of his shoelaces. Out of shoelaces, he made this bow and a little arrow, and he heated them up in his fire, and then he killed his first rabbit. He's not a Seventh-day Adventist, so forgive him. So he killed his first rabbit, and he cut the guts out of the rabbit, and he threw it in the water. And you know what likes that kind of stuff? Fish. And he saw all these fish coming in eating the entrails. So he took rocks and he put them all around him, and he captured fish. He was cooking them over the fire. He was eating like a king in the wilderness. He said, I can do this, because civilization was being knocked right out of him, and Egypt is going to be knocked out of you and I. Now, one night, bad things happen for a good reason. One night, now he would see, when he was walking around the forest, he saw this patch of woods that was like 100 yards wide. It was just flat on the ground. He thought, what was that? Must have been some kind of tornado. One night a tornado came in, knocked the door right off his little cover. He had made this lean-to above this area. He had a little home in there. And this tornado comes through and knocks it right apart. He thought he was going to die. It was like a freight train coming through, and all the trees were down. But he looked in the morning, and guess what he saw? He saw on the lake the tail of the plane sticking up. He goes, they've got food for emergencies in there. And so he makes a raft, and he goes out there with his hatchet. He cuts into the fuselage, and he cuts a big hole in the fuselage, and he grabs this big case out of the back that's an emergency case, and he pulls it out, puts it on his raft, and he floats it to shore. By then it's dark, and he's laying on the beach, and he goes, I'm just going to sleep right here. I'm just dog tired. And he slept right there. In the morning, he got up, and he started opening this case, and he found a .22 rifle that you screw together. It's an emergency rifle. He found a radio, and he thought, that's weird. He set it aside. He turned it on, but it wouldn't even make any noise. And then he had all of these freeze-dried foods and freeze-dried dinners and desserts. And he thought, I'm going to eat like a king today. And he said, they even had a stove in there and all of this stuff. He says, I'm going to feast today. And so he starts making his food. And he's saying, oh, this is going to be great. He was looking forward, when he gets back to civilization, for a big double hamburger and a milkshake and a double order of fries. And that's what he kept talking about all the time. If I could just get that big old hamburger. So now he had all this food, and he was cooking it, and a pontoon plane landed on the lake. And he thought, what in the world? First plane I've seen in 54 days. And the man pulls up right onto this beach, gets out. He goes, you're that boy. He goes, I don't know if I'm that boy, but this is my food, and I'm going to eat it. Would you like to join me? And the man said, sure. And he goes, are you Brian Robeson? He goes, I am. He goes, how long have you been out here? 54 days. And he goes, but I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I need to eat because I haven't ate a good meal like this in 54 days. And so they sat down together, and they ate that food. When they took him back to civilization, his mom and dad thought he had been dead. He was never the same person again. He gets back about the time and school starts again. And he never was comfortable in civilization again. And God is going to put you through such a trouble so that you will never be comfortable in this world again. Do you understand? And it's only because he loves you. He's going to knock Egypt right out of each one of us if we will let him. At this time, we got our closing hymn. Hymn number 633. Keep my mic on, if you don't mind. All right, we're going to sing a song. And I'm sorry this took so long. We didn't get started till about 12 o'clock. And I don't usually preach quite this long, so you can fire me if you like. Oh, yeah, after lunch, hold on just a second. After lunch, we're going to have a training seminar for Thunder in the Holy Land. I am going to tell a few stories if you want to come. Even if you're not interested in joining in the witnessing program, it is a fabulous program that will shock you how easy it is to do. So if you'll come right after potluck, we're going to have a training session in here, and I want to tell you one really good story. All right.
All right, let's all stand and sing hymn number 633.